I didn't sleep well last night. 咁我琴晚唔係瞓得幾好啦。I think I probably had like around 5 hours of sleep. 可能應該瞓咗5個鐘啩。Went to bed around like 3 or something. 應該3點零鐘瞓啦。And then woke up at around 8. 8點鐘起身啦。But the things that have kept me awake has been solved for now. 咁但係令到我瞓唔到嘅嗰樣嘢就已經解決咗啦，暫時咁。So I'll be fine. 咁我應該 OK 嘅。And just kind of like I'll make a coffee later. 咁我轉頭係啦，要沖咖啡啦咁。And I want to finish my writing today. 咁我希望今日可以寫完篇文啦。So I'll just quickly read and then I'll head off to the library with my coffee. 咁我就而家讀書啦。咁讀完之後咧就攬埋杯咖啡，我就出去圖書館啦。Read to resist. Day 175. 當閱讀也是抗爭。第175日。A Concise History of Hong Kong by John Mark Carroll. 香港簡史，從殖民地至特別行政區。Collaboration. The military victory that gave the British the upper hand in the Treaty of Nanking was made possible not just by British military superiority, but also by Chinese collaborators. The British received help from the Chinese before and during the First Opium War, and in the building of their new colony. Even though authorities in Canton ordered the Chinese in Hong Kong to resist the barbarians, the British encountered practically no resistance when they first occupied Hong Kong Island. A British military surgeon wrote that the inhabitants of Hong Kong appear to be industrious and obliging. From all accounts, they seem in general to have been very peaceably disposed, nor did they exhibit any marked approbation or disapprobation on their transfer to the British sway. In the early 1900s, Charles Shelton, a wealthy businessman and the first Chinese member of the Colonial Executive Council, used to boast how his ancestors, who had lived on the island before the British arrived, had helped British post Elliot's proclamation that Hong Kong would be a free port. 有位合作者的故事 與敵合作。英國人打贏了戰爭，故能在南京條約予取予求。英國能戰勝，不是單靠優勢武力，還由於得到中國合作者相助。英國人在鴉片戰爭之前和期間，以及建設他們的新殖民地之時，都獲得中國人協助。即使廣州當局命令香港華人抵抗外夷，英國首次佔領香港島時，完全沒予抵抗。有位英國軍醫寫道：香港居民似乎勤奮而溫順，從各方面看，他們似乎總體上性格很平和。對於改受英國統治，看不出他們有明顯的贊同或厭惡。殷商周壽臣是殖民地議政局首名華人議員，其祖先在英國人到來前已世居香港。周壽臣在1900年代初自誇，他的祖先曾協助英國人張貼義律宣布香港為自由港的告示。No single reason adequately explains why some Chinese were so eager to help the British. Nor did the British find Chinese collaborators everywhere during the First Opium War. For example, the British had great difficulty obtaining supplies in the early part of the war, especially during their unsuccessful and short-lived occupation of Zhoushan, known to foreigners as Chushan, a small island near Shanghai on the China coast where the local Chinese refused to cooperate. Some collaborators justified their actions through their resentment of the Manchus. Others were from sub-ethnic groups who had long cooperated with Europeans in the waters off the southern China coast. For most of these collaborators, however, working with the British was primarily a matter of wealth and power. 沒有單一原因足以解釋 何以有些中國人那麼熱心幫助英國人？而英國人在第一次鴉片戰爭期間，也不是到處均能找到肯與他們合作的中國人。例如在戰爭初期，英國人取得補給方面遇到很大困難，尤其是佔領舟山期間。舟山是上海附近的中國船。舟山是上海附近的中國沿海島嶼。由於該地中國人不肯合作，英國人佔領的時間很短，並不成功。有些合作者因為痛恨滿人，所以理直氣壯與外國人合作；另一些則來自長期在華南沿海與洋人合作的次族群。但是這些人與英國人合作，大多主要是為了金錢和權力。So this is the reading of today. 咁我今日就讀到呢度啦。And it's kind of interesting, right? I have no idea about like the history of other colonies back in the days, like in late 19th century or early 20th century. 我覺得都幾有趣嘅。我又唔知道其他殖民地嘅歷史啦，咁樣，所以我都唔肯定，即係譬如喺19世紀末20年代初，即係關於殖民地呢啲地方，即係其他殖民地其實佢哋係點樣面對嘅咧？咁I did hear about something about Macau 度，但係咧我記得我有聽過關於澳門嘅故事嘅。I was told like why the roads, like the Chinese names of the streets in Macau, like they are very, very difficult to pronounce and remember. 咁咧，我記得咧就係有聽過點解澳門咧佢哋啲街名咧全部都咁翹口撐手嘅咧 ？Because like a lot of streets were named after Portuguese officials or colonists, right? 咁因為好多其實澳門嘅街佢哋都係啲葡萄牙人即係起命名啊，即係可能係佢哋以前啲總督啊，或者即係係啦啲官員啊之類啦咁。Now, what I've heard before was that like the translator, as a defiant to the Portuguese government, refused to name those streets like properly and easily for people. 咁我聽到嘅故事咧就係話當時即係做翻譯嘅人咧就唔願意咧係將嗰啲街名譯到即係好容易等大家記得啊，知道邊條街啊咁樣。And so they did it like phonetically in a way that is very difficult for locals to remember. 咁所以佢哋咧就係特登譯到就係即係照音譯跟住嗰啲名，即係就係去譯啦咁然後就係等咧即係本地人其實根本都唔會用嘅咁樣。And whereas like among the locals, they would just continue to use their own street names before the Portuguese came. 咁然後即係其實本地人咧根本係唔會叫嗰啲街名嘅，佢哋都係會叫翻自己，即係喺做殖民地之前嗰啲街係叫咩名，佢哋就叫翻嗰啲街名，咁就即係唔用啲葡萄牙人嗰啲街名咯咁。So it's kind of like they refuse to use the street names that were imposed like on them by the Portuguese 咁所以都講得幾有趣嘅。So for me it's very interesting. So like I mean these are urban myths probably. 咁即係呢啲都係即係啦，道聽途說翻嚟㗎啦，咁樣都唔知係咪真嘅咁。But I guess like reading this now， 咁但係即係啱啱讀到呢一度咧，talking about like how people in Hong Kong were being described as industrious and obliging。咁然後就讀到即係話香港人好勤奮同埋溫順啦咁 ，which is so true though， 覺得好真啊咁樣啦 ，because I mean yes I mean we have this joke about Hong Kongers all really love to work 即係我哋有個笑話就係即係成日都講香港人好中意返工啦，係咪 ？So like we are industrious， 我哋係好勤奮嘅咁樣啦。And then about like obliging， 即係咪溫順咁樣？Well, I mean, just look at like how we have been protesting against the government ever since the handover, and how long did it take us to get into a point in 2019? And even when we were using Molotov cocktails, they were only used to create barriers for the police.Rather than like really attacking them like as a weapon， 咁我覺得 即係係咯，你睇翻我哋搞咗咁多年，即係係啦，抗議啊、成嘢啊、抗爭，即係由主權移交之後，即係我哋即係遊行啊呢啲咁樣，一路都係和理非啦，係咪？要發展到去到2019年，即係先至話即係啊，我哋出汽油彈咁出火魔咁樣，咁但係即係我哋啲火魔都主要係用嚟即係阻截啲狗去追捕我哋啦，即係好少嘅時間係真係用嚟做武器啦咁樣樣。I mean, of course, there were times that we also have more radical form of protest or conflict with the police. 咁當然我哋都有即係同啲狗有激烈嘅對抗嘅時刻啦。咁，but like most likely it would just be like self-defense。咁但係好多時候我哋就係即係自我防守啦。咁，or you know like even though we were really trying to fight with them, we just didn't have like enough resources to do so。咁但係就算即係我哋真係想同佢打過死過都好啦，其實我哋都係冇足夠嘅資源啦咁樣樣。So I guess it's just like reading this is just like make me smile in a way that like there is something about people in Hong Kong 咁我諗我真係而家讀呢度咁我就覺得即係有啲會心微笑，即係香港人其實係真係一個好特別嘅民族，係即係好獨特嘅諗法。And it is true too. I mean 咁同埋都係真嘅，就係 at the time again like we were being ruled by the Manchurians。咁我哋當時係滿洲人管治啦，清朝嘅時候。And my understanding like from where I remember when I was studying history， 咁即係我記得即係細個讀歷史嘅時候 we have this idea about like you know how good each different dynasty were。 咁我哋當時會即係讀嘅時候都會講，即係到底咩朝會好啲，咩朝冇咁好啊咁。Now Qing dynasty was definitely one of those like bad dynasty。咁清朝即係一直以嚟讀嘅時候都係佢係即係差嘅咁 ，except for a few emperors， 即係除咗有幾個即係係啦，乾隆啊、康熙啊呢啲咁樣啦咁。So it's but again like it's also even though we were under colonial rule at the time when I study history， 咁雖然我讀歷史嘅時候都係即係殖民政府嘅時代啦咁 ，but I do get that feeling， 但我都會覺得感受到咧就係the Manchurians is not the rightful ruler of China or you know that area。咁嗰陣時都會覺得就係滿洲人唔應該係即係合法統治呢一個地方，即係中國呢個地方嘅人嚟嘅咁樣樣。So it's very interesting。我覺得都幾有趣咁。Probably that's the way that the colonists want us to think that you know like you weren't under any legitimate rule anyway you know。 咁可能都係即係當時嘅殖民政府都會想我哋覺得即係你本身其實就算唔係俾我哋殖民，你都係即係俾滿洲人統治，你都唔係即係想跟佢噶啦，即係佢都唔係你覺得你想跟嘅人啦，即係咁樣樣。So and so also in a way maybe they would think that they have saved us from the Qing dynasty as well, right? Because like towards the end, like Qing was really poor and you know the policy was bad, you know, like people were living in a very hard state and in general it's just a very weak nation, right？ 咁當然即係當時就係即係滿清積弱，就係即係去到尾嘅時候就好明顯啦，係咪？咁如果唔係唔會發生呢一啲咁樣即係八國聯軍啊、鴉片戰爭啊，即係係啦，即係義和團嗰啲鳩嘢啊咁樣樣。So yeah, and I do remember thinking at the time that so Xun Yat-sen was the figurehead, you know。 咁即係當時讀書嘅時候就係覺得孫中山就係最重要嘅人客咁樣樣，即係孫中山就係反清復明，然後即係係啦點樣即係將我哋成個國家喺即係滿洲人手上攞翻嚟咁樣樣咁。So I think like this also explains like the complexity of the Hong Kong history as well。 咁我覺得即係都係解釋到即係其實香港歷史本身背後都有啲好複雜嘅嘢，即係關於嗰個身份認同啊，關於個根源嘅問題。And it's all about like this identity and the issue of like a home and the roots。咁所以我覺得呢個都係 讀呢一個書，即係其中一個，即係好多呢啲咁樣嘅諗法。So this is what I've been thinking recently as well, right? Especially when you're in exile, you think about roots, you think about home, you think about identity. 咁呢啲都係即係我覺得流亡海外嘅手足，即係都會係即係時刻都會思考嘅嘢啦，咁樣樣。So this is it for today。咁我哋今日讀到呢度，and I'll see you again tomorrow。咁我哋聽日再見，拜拜。